All right, welcome to section 1, lesson 3 on form arrays. So if form groups that we saw in our last lesson are analogous to JavaScript's objects, and we saw this in the initial introduction video as well, form arrays are analogous to JavaScript arrays. In our first exercise, let's make a simple dynamic form array. So for our first exercise here, for the simple dynamic forms array, we'll start out with the HTML template below. Note that the buttons in the template below are already wired up to methods in the component class. First, create a form array and bind its value to the pre-element at the bottom and use the ng4 structural directive and form bindings we've used in the past to bind our new form array to the template. Finally, fill out the form control and remove control methods of the component class so that we can add and remove controls to the form array. All right, so let's start this out by creating a form, which is a new form array. And we'll create this, as we can see here in the IntelliSense autocomplete stuff up here. It takes an array of controls as the first argument here. And that's the only one we're going to care about for this example. So we could do an empty array, and we can see that actually works fine. But let's go ahead and create some new form controls. So here is, let's put hello, the first one. Let's put world, the second one. And then let's take the form array value. We're going to say form.value. Let's pipe that to JSON so we can read it nice. So as we can see here, we have a form array whose value is hello and world, which maps as we expected to what we initialized our form controls with, which is great. We have our form array now, and it's wired up, but it's not bound yet to our template. So let's do that real quick. So we have here, this is the element. This div right here corresponds to this piece right here, which is great. But let's make this dynamic here and make it dynamic by using an ng4 structural directive. So we're actually going to say let's just call it control of form dot controls. Right. So if we look at this, here's our form. So let's just put in for autocomplete. Controls is giving us the abstract control array. So this is actually for a form array, if you use the controls property, you can get the array of controls that we passed in, or the array of controls it currently holds. So let's get rid of that for now. So what we're doing here is we're looping through each control inside of our form array, and let's bind these here. So rather than just having this label always have controls 0, and let's do this. Let I equals index. So what we're doing here too is, as we go through our ng4 loop, control will reference the control that we're looping through, the specific control we're on, but I will now contain the index as well. So rather than always having this label before control 0, we're now going to have it be pointed at control plus I. right? So for the 0th item, it will be for control 0. Let's put the binding here as well. So boom. And let's update the ID here as well. So what this is going to do, in case you weren't aware, the combination of the label for and the input ID is so that if we were to click on the label here, the proper input would be selected. So what we're essentially doing is we're matching up the IDs to the for, or rather the for of the label to the ID of the input, so that we can get sort of that behavior going. And it's not liking this for some reason. Lexer error unterminated. We have an extra single quote right there. Great. And then we still need to bind the form control here. So we're going to take the form control directive and point this to control. So this is, remember, we're looping through each control here. That's all that this is pointing to, is the control we're currently looped at. And then for the button click events, so we won't implement the logic for the method yet, but let's make sure we're at least passing in the proper index. So our index, remember, is referenced at I right now, so we're just going to remove control at I. So we've essentially created this loop right here inside of this div element for each one of our form controls. Let's hit save and make sure that's all wired up properly. So as we can see here, we have hello and we have world. If we were to change some text here, we can see it reflected down below, and likewise right there. So let's get our remove and, well, let's start with the remove functionality for now. So we're already calling the method when we click it. It's just the method isn't doing anything right now. So let's make it actually do something. So inside of this method, we're going to say this.form, and I believe there's just a nice little method on a form array, remove at, which will take an index, which we are thankfully already passing into the method. And that's all we'll have to do. Let's make sure that's working properly. So if we click this button, we call remove at 1, and we can see world is gone now. If we click this one, we called remove at 0, and our array is empty, which is what we want. So let's add the new control to the array here. So as we can see, the button is already calling this add control method. Let's just make sure that method is now doing something. So we'll say this.form is there an add? I don't believe there is. Form control. Oh, that's right. We can just call a push. So what we're the form array has a push method that works just like an array push. So we're going to push onto the form array a new, and you can see here it takes an abstract control. So for this example, we're just going to say here's some new form control. And we're just going to pass an empty string into that to start. So by doing all this, we can now add some array, or add a new control to the bottom of the array. And you can see we can do that as many times as we want, and everything stays in sync. If we type in the various controls, everything is reflected properly in the values below. And if we remove the bottom, we can see things being removed. If we move somewhere in the middle, This is no big deal. Do note though that as we remove some of these, remember we're using the index as we see up top here. So index may shift on you if you're working with form arrays. That's something to keep in mind. Never to count on put too much stock into an index, just because if you are dynamically adding or removing controls to your array, you probably shouldn't be confident or expect to be confident that they'll be in the position you expect them to be at. And just as an editorial note, I find I rarely use form arrays in actual apps. I think it definitely has use cases, and we'll see some of these as we go deeper into the course. But oftentimes we'll see that form arrays, when you use a form array in the real world, it tends to hit a very specific niche. Normally, I think you'd use a form group for most of your collections of forms. And that's just because you do get very reliable indexing on your form groups, because you are indexing it based on a given name rather than based off an index that is kind of meant to shift around as you go through. So as with the form group, the form array hosts an array of abstract controls, and this means we can fill it with form controls, form groups, or other form arrays, as well as any combination of these three. So we happen to be only putting in form controls for this first example, but let's see this play out in our next example, where we're going to take our hero form that we created in our previous exercise, and we're going to create a party from this now. And let's bring in some CSS real quick, because I'm just noticing we're missing some of that. Let's go into party form .css, and we'll go to party form component CSS, right, and completed party form component CSS lesson 3 section 1. There we go. Let's copy all these over real quick. That'll give us the proper styles on our form. Perfect. While we're looking at this, just to call out too, if at any point you get stuck working on this by yourself, you can always jump to the completed examples or look at the completed examples inside of the code, inside of the example app that we're kind of working through here. So let's jump into the form component now. So for this example, let's revisit the hero form we built in the previous lesson, but in this form, we built an entire party of heroes. At the top level, we'll have a control to house the party's name, as well as another control for the party size, so that we see those two right here. Let's switch back to working, so we're not cheating and getting ahead of ourselves. In addition, we'll have a form array of heroes whose size matches the value of the control. See the party interface for the exact shape of the data of our form, and create a form group to reflect this structure, and then bind it appropriately to the skeleton in the HTML. Great. So let's look at some of the resources we have to work with inside of our party form component. So we have this party interface. And as we can see, we have a name, which is a string, and party size, which is a number. So this mapped to these two elements right here. And then we have a hero array. And that hero array should match in size to whatever is selected here. So in this case, the party size is 6. We should see 6 hero forms. And we can see here in the last lesson we talked about these factory functions. So we can see here's a create hero factory function that just kind of creates a blank hero, which will be useful to us. And here we also have a create hero form, which is going to give us that form group for each one of these hero forms right here. So given some hero, we return a form group, and we either pass in, as you can see, hero is optional here. So we either pass in a hero that will populate with the initial values of that hero, or if there's no hero provided, we sort of have the default values over here as well. Great. So now that we have that, and we'll see we also have these possible party sizes. This is just to fill out the options for this select array. So let's make our party form group. Right. So we'll create a form. We'll say this is a new form group. And so we'll have name. So this is the party name. Let's see, is this, okay, so it's just called name per our interface at the top here. So name is a new form control. And we'll initialize that with an empty string. And party size, we'll make that a new form control, and we'll put 2 in it for now. So by default, this party size should have a value of 2 when the component initializes. And given that we have the 2 here, for our heroes property, we'll say heroes is a new form array, and we'll have just an array, and we'll just call that create hero form. Let's call that twice. All right. So as we can see with this hero form, create hero form factory function, we just created a hero form that that just has, since we did pass in a hero, it just kind of gave it these default values. And let's skip to the end here and just say form.value pipe JSON. And this is just to make sure things are correct before we start wiring up the bindings. Right, so here we see there is a form value here. Let's get rid of that real quick. We'll just say party object there. Great. And so we can see, based off the values we initialized the form group, we have a party object that has a name, has a party size, then has an array of heroes. And as we can see, that matches up with our interface as we would expect. Great. So, given that, let's start wiring it up to our template up here. So based on this form, we will attach the form group is equal to form at the top level. And then here for party name, we have the form control name is equal to name. Let's save that real quick, just make sure that that's all wired up properly. So we'll type in Zach for name. So that would be the name of our party. So let's solve the coolest party. There you go. Cool. And let's bind our size so we can see everything's already wired up to go through the possible party sizes. So all we really have to do here is set a binding to the form control name, and we actually don't need the square brackets. Equals party size. So that maps to this party size form control. Now we can see it's set to 2, but that's actually not working right yet. We can see why that is down here below in our sort of debug pre-object. So it's coming through as a string here. And that's because of what we had mentioned before. If we just pass in, if we don't set a value on each option, it's going to default to the string that's held in between the tags, which is not what we want here actually. So we're going to use the ng value directive to be size. So for each one of the possible sizes, this value it should represent is size. So now, as we can see, it's wired up initially correctly, so it's reflecting the 2, and if we change it, we actually get the number 4 as opposed to the string 4. So that is now appropriately wired up, and let's go down here. So as you can see, we have some sort of animations on this, and we'll see this sort of play out again. We'll see this play out in a few steps, but well, let's actually leave this alone for now. I think that's probably the best way to go about it initially. And let's see, where did these field sets start and end? Well, I'm trying to figure out where we want to put the ng4 on. I think we probably want to put it on this hero container div, right? So let's try that. So we'll say ng4 equals, and we'll use the form let hero form of form dot controls. And then we pass in here the heroes dot controls. And now we are looping through each one of the hero forms held inside of the heroes property of the form group. So you'll note I did this right here, and this is kind of out of habit just from having dealt with this a lot before. Using the controls on a form group, so if we were to go down here and say this.form.controls, when it's on, we saw in the last example, when we did this for an array, it gave us an array of abstract controls. Here it gives us an object of abstract controls. So we could have up top here done controls.heroes.controls. But just because of the way the Angular language tools work, it tends not to like that, so you tend to get this red squiggly line. So I tend to just do this, which is essentially the same thing. It just looks a little different. But this kind of confuses the Angular language service enough to let it get by without the red squigglies. So that's all we're really doing there. So now we're looping through each one of the hero forms, and we should see this here reflected below, right? So now we can see we have our 2 hero forms, And I'm actually not sure. These should be side by side. I'm not sure why that is, but I'll take a look in a little bit. And like we did before, let's say let I equals index. So this way we can track along the index as we go. And now we're just going to, inside of here, like we did before, make our fors and our IDs dynamic to that I. And this is to make sure when we click on labels that we're clicking, the thing that the form control that becomes active is correct. Because if we don't set this up, the IDs will all be identical, and so when you click on a label, it will not be definitive which control gets selected. And we can see that's actually the case right here because we haven't saved yet. As we go ahead and click save, we'll see when we click on this one, it is, well, actually we haven't done that for attack yet, but if we did for name, yes, because we've set up name now, the name is correct. So let's go through here and correct these things real quick. So let's just do some multi-cursor magic real quick for then that. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Plus I. Boom. Then for ID, a similar thing. Right. Excellent. Boom. And as we go across, let's just grab that real quick to add our form control name equals paste. All right. So we have to, for now, let's do it this way. So we'll add the form group directive up top here. And this will be hero form. Inside of this form, we're going to use the form group name to be stats. And for this input right here, the form control name to be name. I believe that will all work. Let's test it out to make sure. And then we'll also figure out why these hero forms aren't appearing side by side. So right now we can try a name. Let's put Zach here. We should see, yes, the first Zach is being updated. If we go up and down, that is all wired up properly. And let's put a test here. You can see that's all proper as well. And now if we change it to 3, 2, this is not working yet. And we will have to add this into our, we'll have to add a listener to the change on this specific control in order to get this proper. But we can see, for the most part, everything we have now is set up and bound correctly. So we're in good shape. The last thing we need to add is, as we change this, and this is similar to what we saw previously, as we change this, we're going to have to go and change our FormArray to add or remove heroes from it. But before we do that, let's just take a look at the CSS and see what's going on with that. Let's make it full screen. Why are you not appearing side by side? So rather than this hero appearing on top of the other, they should be side by side. Let's figure out what's going on with that. Let's actually jump into the completed and make sure that's appearing properly on this side, which is correct. Let's take a look at the completed template, because I think we may have bound the template differently than what I was expecting to show in my completed example. So let's go to completed party form. And this is lesson 3. Perfect. So let's take a look at the hero container. So we initially, okay. So the hero container, in our example, we actually used the ng4 on the hero container. The hero container is actually supposed to be this larger container for all heroes. So let's fix that quickly. It should be essentially the same. The only difference is the ng4 will move down slightly. So let's just copy that actually. Hit save. And now put the ng4 right before that form group. I believe that's all we have to see. Yep. And so now we can see everything is appearing side by side. Perfect. We're on working. Right. So this is where we're at. Everything is still wired up correctly. Perfect. So now we're side by side. Great. So let's look at that piece of functionality we have to still add. So this is, we are going to listen to this one control. And we can do this too. In a previous section, we listened to an entire form group, and that's fine. But sometimes it makes sense to just listen to one control of a form group, which is fine too. So we'll go on, and because we have to set up a subscription here, let's bring in onDestroy and make sure we properly implement that by adding an ng onDestroy cycle hook, and as we've done many times before, let's just create our destroying subject, just a new subject of void. Make sure that's imported inside of our destroy lifecycle hook. We just call next on it. Right. And then inside of our ng on init, we're going to listen to this .form, .controls, and we're going to get specifically, well, let's actually do this. We're going to use get instead. So this will take in a string and will return the control we wanted. So we want to listen to party size. In this case, we want to the value changes, and let's pipe it. So we're going to take until this destroying. And normally we would start with on this as well, but since we're already starting with 2 empty hero forms, I think we're fine with that. So we'll just skip that for this specific implementation. So we won't be adding a starts with for this example. But let's go in and we will do a tap on this. And for now, let's just do this. We'll say value console.log value. Right, and let's make sure we have tap. This will just incrementally add things to this as we go. So let's make sure we're subscribing. And let's look at our console. Make sure things are happening as we expect. So we got a 3, we got a 5, we got a 6, we got a 4. So let's think about what we actually have to do in each one of these cases. So in the first change we had, originally, remember, we started out with 2, and then we went to 3. So in this case, what we'd have to do is we'd have to push a new form control onto our hero's form array. And that should be easy enough for us to do. And so going from 3 to 5, same thing, but we have to do it twice. Going 5 to 6, same thing, we have to do it once. Going from 6 to 4, however, we need to remove the multiple hero forms, so we had to remove 2. And we probably should remove the last 2. So we'll take, if you recall the the form array API, there's a removes at with an index, so we probably wanted to remove the at indexes 6 and 5. So let's go ahead and figure out how to actually implement that here. So given this value, let's just leave this tap for now. I'll get rid of it later. So given this value, we'll say, instead of calling it value, let's say new party size. So we have a better variable name to work with. So given this, let's say, so there was the 2 situations we kind of ran into. One where the new party size was greater than the previous party size, and one where it was less than. So let's start with greater than. So we'll say if new party size is greater than, and we'll just look at this stuff, form dot get heroes. So we're trying to get the form array to see how large it is. And we'll say this is a form array. So we actually don't know until we do that. Oops. So if we say dot, I think we can get length off of that. Yes. So we can just say if our new party size is greater than our current hero's form array, then what we want to do is push a number of new hero controls equal to the current length, or equal to the new party size minus the current length. So let's just code that up. Let's say heroes to add equals, we'll just take this, copy this new party size minus that, right? We'll just do a for loop, a simple for loop. Let I equals 0 as less than heroes to add I plus plus this dot form dot get heroes as form array. Let's code that in parentheses dot push. Then we're going to do a so we need to push onto it a new form control. So we're going to call our factory function create a new hero form. Right. So let's make sure this works properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to try this out, and let's get rid of our console for now. We're just going to go from 2 to 4. And so this is the case where the new party size is greater than the old array. So let's make sure this works. Great. So as we can see, when we went from 2 to 4, we pushed on 2 new hero forms onto the array. And as you see, because we have these nice fade in and fade out animations on our form, it added those and it looked pretty nice. So we can see from going 4 to 6. Now, since we haven't done the case where the new party size is less than the old party size, that's not working yet. So let's do that. So we'll say here, and let's return after this. That'll just reset things so it doesn't even try to evaluate anything past this point. So now let's say if the opposite is true. And so we'll say if new party size, let's just clean up our code a little bit. Let's call this constant previous party size is equal to, let's grab that, paste. Oh, looks like we missed a parenthesis. Right, but now whenever we did this, we can simply say previous party size. Perfect. And that'll be easier to read. So now we say if new party size is less than the previous party size, what do we do? Okay, so first let's do similar things we did before, right? So we'll say arrows to remove is equal to previous party size minus new party size. Then for let I equals 0, I is less than heroes to remove, I plus plus. I have to do some math on this still. So we're going to say, let's grab this, same as before, copy, boom. And now, instead of using push though, we're going to call remove at, and we'll take previous party size minus I believe that may work. I think I might need a -1 as in addition, but let's see if that works. So let's go here. So let's make sure first, well, let's add a return just for sanity's sake. Well, we didn't really even need that. No point in doing that, I suppose. So for sanity's sake, let's move this to 4, make sure that works still. So as we can see, going from 2 to 4 worked fine. Let's go from 4 back to 2. And we only got rid of 1. So yes, we do need -I, -1, I believe. Let's make sure that works. So we have 2, go to 4, perfect. Now go back to 2. And there we go. So now we should see where going up is fine, going down is perfectly fine as well. Everything works. The objects reflect properly. Let's make sure that's true. So we can see we added 4. We went up to party size of 4. We have now 4 heroes in our array, which is perfect. So we change any of these, things get changed as we expect. If we click on any label, the highlighted field or the active field is the one we expected to. So I think everything's working fine here. Great. And now we'll see too. Let's jump to the completed version of this because I wanted to point out something. Something about the way we did this. So as you'll see, we pushed and we removed at a given form array. So we're kind of treating that form array as an immutable, or not an immutable, but rather a mutable object that we are changing. It's a mutable array. We're pushing things onto it. We're popping some stuff off of it, essentially. But if we look at the completed example we have here, and you'll see I think I did slightly different logic, but you can take a look at it. It's maybe a little bit cleaner. It uses while loops instead of the for loops we used in our examples while live coding. But you'll see here, alternatively, we could have taken this more immutable approach. So let's copy that and bring it over to our actual party form. Right, so let's do that. Boom, and let's comment out this temporarily. Let's just now find name heroes. What did it need heroes for? Well, let's just look at it in the context of the completed. So let's jump to show completed. Let's comment this part out. Comment this part in. Hit save. So I just wanted to show for this example. So what we did was, this is treating the form array as being more immutable. So rather than taking an existing one and pushing or removing it, the array, you can create just a new form array. So this creates a constant new form array, so it's a pointer to a new form array. It goes ahead and creates all the things in that form array, so pushes a bunch of heroes onto it, and then takes our form and sets the control of heroes to that new form array, which is, it's perfectly acceptable to do as well. The reason we did it using more of a mutable structure in our live coding is because it kind of messes with the animations. So we'll see here if we hit, did we ever save this? I think we did. We jump to show completed. That's getting all out of whack. I don't even know what's going on with that actually. Let's hit refresh. I know there's issues with the animations that were causing this to happen. So if we can just think about this conceptually, when we have our animations here, our fade out and our fade in, this is being done at this level of adding or removing one of these for hero form, as you can see outlined by this sort of black border. So if we were to add, going back to our working example right now, so as we went to for, and of course we've commented that out. Let's get rid of that. Let's actually just delete that and uncomment all this beautiful code we wrote together. Save on that. So as we went from 2 to 4, these two elements remained in the DOM, and then because we had 2 more elements, we could see for these fade out and these fade in animations, 2 new elements were added to the DOM. However, using the immutable method that we saw, that's actually not the case. Rather than having 2 previously existing elements in the DOM and just adding 2 more into it, what we did was we had 2 elements in the DOM before, and then we actually jettisoned all of that and added 4 completely new ones. So we'd have seen these hero forms sort of fading out and then 4 new ones fading in, which doesn't really match the mental model of what our users are going to be thinking about when they are using our form. They're going to be thinking about it much more in the case, well, these 2 already exist, let's add 2 new ones to go to 4. Or these 4 existed, but then we went to 3, so let's get rid of 1. As opposed to let's get rid of all 4 and add 3 new ones. So that's why we ended up implementing things this way. If you think about it too, we have to be careful about changing pushing and removing at inside of a subscription to changes, because actually we're kind of thrashing our pipe a little bit here. So when we call, when we add two arrays, for example, this push is emitting a value change event. So as we go through and we add two heroes, we are pushing one, which triggers this all to happen again, and then immediately triggers another. So we kind of just thrash through this pipe, and if we added console logs, actually we have the console log here. Let's take a look. We should see that in most cases, well, maybe that's not the case. Let's see. So let's go from 3 to 4. Oh, we see it only happened once. That's good. Going down to 2, we see it only happened once as well. But yeah, it's just something we have to be mindful of when we're changing the value of a form inside of a subscription that listens to its value changes. We have to be kind of thoughtful of that, and there's ways we can prevent ourselves against that in cases where it is a concern by adding this debounce time operator onto, or this debounce time ArcGIS operator onto our pipe. And this will just make sure that if we ever do legitimately thrash our pipe, that it won't happen too frequently. So we'll debounce. We're essentially kicking ourselves to the back of the event queue or the action queue in terms of our JavaScript engine by doing this. So this will make sure if we were to change the value of our form that it's only happening. It's the operations that we're providing here in our pipe are only happening once. And actually the reason that we're not seeing the pipe thrashed here is because we are subscribing to a specific controls change. So while we are changing the parent form, so we're changing things at the FormArray that's housed by our larger form at the top here. The value changes is actually only on party size. So since this isn't actually changing the party size, we're not getting this thrashing that I was discussing. That's why we're not seeing it here. But if we were, we could kind of sidestep the issue by using debounce time if we needed to. But really, the proper change would be to come up with some architecture that doesn't have to change itself in the middle of subscribing to value changes of itself. So in any case, we've got this pretty nice hero form now, so let's be happy with that. And let's jump into our next section on validation. So let's go.